Midnight, 2012. Mick Schumacher woke up thirsty. He was 14 years old, half asleep, walking through the dark hallway of their home in Switzerland. He passed his parents' bedroom, empty, the door open. He walked down the stairs, the house silent except for the sound of his footsteps. Then he saw light coming from the garage. The door was slightly open. Mick stopped. His father was in there, sitting on a workbench, surrounded by old helmets, old race suits, old trophies. And he was crying. Not sobbing, not loud, just tears running down his face in complete silence. Mick froze. He had never seen his father cry, not once, not ever. Michael Schumacher, 7-time world champion, the man who never showed weakness, the man who controlled everything, was sitting in a garage at midnight, crying. Mick didn't know what to do. He thought about walking away, pretending he hadn't seen it, but something stopped him. He pushed the door open. "Dad?" Michael's head snapped up, his eyes wide, surprised. For a split second, Mick saw his father's face, raw, vulnerable, human. Then Michael wiped his eyes quickly, forcing a smile. "Mick, what are you doing up?" "I was getting water. I saw the light." Michael nodded, standing up, trying to compose himself. "I'm fine, just tired." But Mick could see it. His father wasn't fine. "Dad, are you okay?" Michael looked at him for a long time, then he sighed. "Come here." Mick walked over slowly. Michael sat back down on the workbench, gesturing for Mick to sit next to him. They sat there, father and son, surrounded by the remnants of a career that had defined an entire generation. Michael didn't speak at first. He just looked at the helmets, the suits, the trophies. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet. "I'm retiring, Mick." Mick already knew. The announcement was in 2 weeks, but hearing his father say it out loud made it real. "I know." Michael nodded. "Do you know why I'm crying?" Mick shook his head. Michael picked up a helmet, his 2000 championship helmet, red, battered, scratched from years of use. "Because I don't know who I am without this." Mick didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Michael set the helmet down carefully. "I've been racing since I was 4 years old, Mick. 43 years. I've spent more time in a race car than I have at home, more time in a garage than with your mother, more time chasing speed than chasing anything else." He paused. "And now it's over, and I don't know what comes next." Mick looked at his father, really looked at him. The lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the exhaustion in his posture. This wasn't the Michael Schumacher the world knew. This was just a man, tired, scared, saying goodbye to the only life he'd ever known. "You're still my dad," Mick said quietly. Michael smiled, a real smile this time. "I know, but being your dad is easy. Being Michael Schumacher is hard." "Why?" Michael thought for a moment. "Because everyone expects something from Michael Schumacher. They expect perfection. They expect dominance. They expect a legend. But I'm not a legend, Mick. I'm just a man who drives fast." He looked down at his hands. "And soon, I won't even be that." They sat in silence for a while. Then Mick asked something he'd been wondering for years. "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Racing. All the time away. All the sacrifices." Michael didn't answer immediately. He thought about it. Really thought about it. "No, I don't regret it. Racing gave me everything. It gave me purpose, identity, a way to prove that I mattered." He paused. "But I do regret the cost." "What cost?" Michael looked at Mick. "Missing your childhood, missing moments I can't get back, choosing a race over a birthday, choosing a test over a dinner, choosing speed over time." His voice cracked slightly. "Time is the one thing you can't get back, Mick, and I've spent 43 years running out of it." Mick didn't know what to say. Michael stood up, walking over to a shelf where his 7 championship trophies sat in a neat row. He picked up the 2000 trophy, Ferrari's first in 21 years. "This trophy, I worked 6 years for it, 6 years of failure, 6 years of pressure, 6 years of wondering if I'd made the wrong choice." He set it down. "And when I finally won it, you know what I felt?" "What?" "Relief, not joy. Relief, because the weight was finally off my shoulders." He picked up the 2004 trophy. "This one, I was untouchable that year, won 13 out of 18 races, the most dominant season in history." He paused. "And I was miserable, because I realized something." "What?" Michael looked at Mick. "That no matter how much I won, it would never be enough. There would always be another race, another record, another expectation." He set the trophy down. "And that's why I'm retiring, because I finally realized that winning is not the same as living." Mick felt something shift inside him. His father, the greatest driver in Formula One history, was standing in front of him, admitting that all the glory, all the trophies, all the records weren't enough. "What are you going to do now?" Mick asked. Michael smiled. "I'm going to be your father, not Michael Schumacher the driver, just Michael your dad." He sat back down next to Mick. I'm going to ski with you, watch you race, be at every karting event, every test, every moment I missed." He paused. "I'm going to live, Mick. For the first time in 43 years, I'm going to stop chasing and start living." Mick felt tears in his eyes. "I'm proud of you, Dad." Michael looked at him, surprised. "Why?" "Because you're choosing us. You're choosing to stop. Most people can't do that." Michael put his arm around Mick. "I'm not stopping because I want to, Mick. I'm stopping because I have to. My body can't handle it anymore. My mind can't handle it anymore. I've given everything I have to this sport, and there's nothing left." He paused. "But I'm okay with that, because I know what I'm coming home to." They sat there for a few more minutes, not speaking, just existing together. Then Michael stood up. "Let's go to bed. Tomorrow's a new day." Mick stood up too. As they walked out of the garage, Mick looked back at the trophies, the helmets, the suits. They looked smaller now, less important, just objects, not a life. 2 weeks later, Michael Schumacher announced his retirement. The world reacted with tributes, documentaries, celebrations of a career that had redefined Formula One. But Mick remembered that night in the garage, the tears, the vulnerability, the man behind the legend, and he understood something the world didn't, that his father wasn't retiring because he wanted glory, he was retiring because he wanted peace. 1 year later, Michael Schumacher is skiing in the French Alps with Mick. It's December 29th, a normal day, a father and son enjoying time together. Michael is happy, relaxed, finally free from the pressure of racing. Then he crashes. His head strikes a rock. He falls into a coma, and he never wakes up. Mick is there when it happens. He watches the helicopter take his father away. He watches the doctors work. He watches his mother collapse, and he thinks about that night in the garage, the last real conversation he ever had with his father. The tears, the honesty, the vulnerability. His father had said he wanted to live, and 1 year later, that life was taken away. Years pass. Mick Schumacher becomes a racing driver, just like his father. He joins Formula 2, then Formula 1. Everyone compares him to Michael. He's not as fast. He's not as aggressive. He's not his father. But Mick doesn't care, because he knows something they don't. He knows that being fast is not the same as being whole. He knows that winning is not the same as living. He knows that his father cried in a garage, because he had given everything to racing, and had nothing left. And Mick refuses to make the same mistake. In 2019, Mick wins the Formula 2 championship. After the race, a journalist asks him, "Your father won 7 world championships. Do you feel pressure to match that?" Mick pauses. "No, why not?" Mick thinks about that night in the garage. "Because my father taught me something more important than winning." "What?" Mick looks directly at the camera. "That being the best driver in the world means nothing if you lose yourself along the way." The journalist doesn't understand, but Mick does. In 2021, Mick makes his Formula 1 debut with Haas. It's not Ferrari, it's not Mercedes, it's a struggling backmarker team. But Mick doesn't care, because he's not chasing his father's legacy, he's building his own. After his first race, Mick visits his father. Michael is in a private facility in Switzerland, still unable to speak, still unable to move. Mick sits next to him. "I made it, Dad. I'm in Formula 1. There's no response. Just the sound of medical equipment." Mick holds his father's hand. "I know you can't hear me, but I need to tell you something." He pauses. "That night in the garage, when I found you crying, that was the most important moment of my life." Tears run down Mick's face, because that's when I realized you were human, that even the greatest driver in history had doubts, had fears, had regrets. He squeezes his father's hand. "And it taught me something, that I don't have to be you. I don't have to win 7 championships. I don't have to break every record." He smiles. "I just have to be me, and that's enough." There's still no response, but Mick doesn't need one, because he knows his father would understand. In 2022, Mick loses his Formula 1 seat. Haas drops him. The press calls him a failure. Fans say he was never good enough. But Mick doesn't break, because he remembers that night in the garage. His father, the greatest driver in history, sitting there crying, because even 7 championships weren't enough. And Mick realizes something, that success is not measured in trophies, it's measured in peace. And his father never had peace, but Mick will. In 2023, Mick joins Mercedes as a reserve driver. It's not a race seat, but it's a lifeline, a chance to stay in the sport. After the announcement, a journalist asks, "Do you think your father would be proud?" Mick doesn't hesitate. "I think my father would be proud that I didn't give up, but I also think he'd be proud if I did." "Why?" Mick smiles. "Because he told me once that living is more important than winning, and sometimes living means knowing when to stop." The journalist writes it down, but they don't understand, because they never saw Michael Schumacher cry. They never saw the man behind the legend. They never saw the father who chose his son over his career. But Mick did.
and that's why he's different. Present day, Mick Schumacher is still racing, still fighting, still pushing, but he's also living. He spends time with his family, he takes vacations, he says no to opportunities that would consume him, because he learned from his father's mistakes, and he honors his father's tears. In interviews, people still ask about Michael. Do you think he'll ever recover? Do you talk to him? What would he say if he could speak? Mick always gives the same answer. I don't know, but I know what he'd want me to do. What's that? Mick looks at the camera. Live, not just race, live. And that's what he does, because that's what his father taught him. Not on a racetrack, not in a press conference, but in a garage, at midnight, with tears in his eyes. The night Mick Schumacher saw his father cry, just once, in 43 years. Michael Schumacher cried once in front of his son. Not when he lost a race, not when he crashed, not when he retired, but when he realized that he had spent 43 years becoming the greatest driver in the world, and he had forgotten to become a father. That's what the tears were for. Not for the career that was ending, but for the time that was lost. And Mick understood, because he was the time that was lost. The birthdays Michael missed, the dinners Michael skipped, the moments Michael traded for speed. Mick was all of it. And that night, in the garage, Michael was finally admitting it. He was finally saying what he had never been able to say. I'm sorry, not out loud, but in tears. And Mick forgave him, not because Michael asked, but because Mick understood that greatness always comes with a cost. And Michael Schumacher paid it, in full. Some people cry because they're weak. Michael Schumacher cried because he was strong enough to admit the truth. That winning 7 world championships didn't make him happy. It made him Michael Schumacher, and Michael Schumacher was tired, so he cried. Once, in a garage, at midnight, in front of his son. And that moment changed everything, not for the world, but for Mick, because he learned something the world never will, that his father was not a legend. He was a man who gave everything to racing, and realized too late that everything was too much. Mick Schumacher races today. But he does it differently. He doesn't chase records. He doesn't sacrifice everything. He doesn't become his father, because his father showed him what happens when you do. You end up in a garage at midnight, crying, alone, surrounded by trophies that don't love you back. And Mick refuses to let that be his story. So he lives. He races. But he lives first, because that's what his father wanted. Even if he never said it out loud, he said it in tears, and Mick heard it, loud and clear, the night his father cried. Just once. The only time that mattered.